Reporters
You could
actually
scream. You could scream at me all you want, but I have every single day
Scott.
condemned the events of January the 6th.
Scott.
Then, now, and I will continue
But
to.
those
All
are
right,
the
let
people
me
who
just say one
conducting
thing.
their violence.
There was no screaming happening at this table. Okay, someone talking to you is not screaming.
CNN's resident MAGA stooge, Scott Jennings, the most insufferably smug MAGA Republican in all of media, and that includes anybody on Fox News, was repeatedly humiliated and debunked in real time by a CNN panel, which also included former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger, and we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. They cover a variety of topics. We're going to jump straight in. And actually, we're going to lead with this because it played during the panel, but CNN played a montage of all the times that Donald Trump said the stock market would crash if he lost the election.
If he gets in, you have the greatest depression in the history of this country. Your stocks will go to hell. Everyone thinks stocks, oh, it's rich people. Everybody owns stocks. Your 401ks. Who has a 401k here? That's a lot of people. If Harris wins this election, the result will be a Kamala economic crash. When I win the election, we will immediately begin a brand new Trump economic boom. It'll be a boom. We're going to turn this country around so fast.
Oh, boy.
Okay, so, I mean, which one is it? I mean, it cannot...
So you see where this is going, right? Obviously, Trump was wrong about what would happen to the stock market if and when President Biden defeated him in 2020. And he won the 2024 election, but the stock market's getting its ass kicked as a direct consequence of Donald Trump's very stupid, very capricious trade policy. So again, setting the stage up for for Scott Jennings' humiliation by multiple people. So we're going to start with this clip here.
But isn't the premise of the Trump economy that businesses will have confidence to invest again and that they're going to feel that the government is trying to help them, not hurt them? I mean, they're literally saying that the opposite is happening right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you, I mean, I talk to many Republican friends that are like, well, I don't like Donald Trump, but he's better for the economy. And it's always, there's a significant amount of Republicans that are saying that. I actually think the administration's doing the best they can with the numbers that are coming out. I probably would be doing the same thing, kind of downplaying it, see where we actually go on this. But there's no doubt if the economy ends up going into recession territory, not just a stock market, correction, it will be very hurtful to Donald Trump. And honestly, he has a fundamental misunderstanding of the role of tariffs. He really believes that the United States is going to get very rich from tariffs, and this is going to close the budget deficit. That's not the reality. Tariffs should be used if you're fighting real unfair trade practices, but not against your friends and not because you think you can raise money with it.
And again, so that's former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger, who became a rhino because he wouldn't support Donald Trump's insurrection. Again, pointing out the fact that tariffs can be used surgically, precisely, for national security interests and with very specific sectors, but not the way that Donald Trump is doing it. So let's get into some back and forth with Scott Jennings being punked.
You have a veteran out there saying, I'm a veteran and you don't give an F about me. That is in line with how people feel about Donald Trump. And
Totally
if you
false.
want to go off,
Totally
and
false.
if you want to say that
Scott,
it's
if
liberal
you want to tell yourself a story about these paid
if you want to
mobs,
say
go
that it
ahead.
is liberal
Paid
elitists
mobs?
going and they're being paid,
my guest.
then you guys are going to lose the midterms. And you know what?
Roy,
Wonderful.
Go ahead.
So you're telling me everybody that's showing up to these town halls to boo these Republicans on these crazy policies that they're supporting right now, these are all paid. We're going back to paid. We're playing the hits from 2020.
It's unrepresentative of that congressional district where this guy got like 56% of the vote.
So was unemployment
and
and
of the state, which Donald Trump won. These are unrepresentative, unhinged mobs. I don't know what else to tell you. That's what they are.
And do you think
You have a
So again, veterans apparently who disagree with their Republican lawmakers, apparently you're just a paid liberal shill activist, right? You can't have any legitimate concerns. You can't possibly be a conservative or be a veteran and have a principled objection to your congressman's actions or their inaction or the party's leader. That's what Scott Jennings wants you to believe. And if you want to talk about representation, well, then you can look at the polls, which are pretty bad for Donald Trump overall in terms of his approval rating. He's underwater and on a whole host of other issues. So Scott is once again objectively wrong there. But here's another clip.
Because it's
As
having
the one
fun.
guy-
you've gone through
as
these
the one
conversations.
guy that's actually done this, okay? Let me just say, as a congressman, you hate doing town halls. I mean, that's just a reality. Now, why did I hate doing town halls? I did a bunch, but truly because you're facing people that are upset with you, and that's okay. People have a right to be upset with you. And by the way, if the Republicans are happy with their congressman, they have every right to show up and compliment him. The questions that Scott went over, they asked these. I've been asked the same things from Tea Party meetings too, by the way. Why are you shredding the Constitution? Why is Obama shredding the Constitution? The reality is this is scaring Republicans, and it should, because this mimics what happened in 2010 when you saw the Tea Party rise up. And that started in August. I mean, maybe you're right.
Just for the record,
I think
no
what
one
he's-
here
what
knows.
he's saying
Hey,
is
you
totally
keep
right.
stomping on
that
me.
in the
Let me
sense that
finish.
the Tea Party engineered.
Again, Scott's like having a meltdown here. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Adam Kinzinger is the only one here on that panel who actually served in public office in that way, a Republican lawmaker, and he's saying, listen, town halls suck because you're probably facing people who disagree with you, right? It's almost like a review bias, right? Unless you're really prompted to leave a review, more often than not, if you go out of your way to review somebody's work or to show up and confront them, it's probably to voice a concern or a complaint, right? That's just a natural predisposition towards any town hall. Most people don't go out of their way, I like what my congressman's doing, so I'm going to go sit in a town hall and just simply praise them. Usually what you want to do is voice your concern, or otherwise you're just not going to show up. So again, I appreciate the candor by Adam Kinzinger there in saying that, he even got it from other conservatives as well, who said, you're not going far enough, or you've gone too far here. Again, Scott Jennings just doesn't want to hear it. Here's another clip.
Which is probably the reason that y'all are all sitting here today.
I'm not arguing they're not angry. I'm just telling you, mobs like this are not representative of overall congressional
Are you
districts.
really calling them mobs
Did you see the video?
No.
It was like a mob to me.
Okay, all right. Are you going to call them mobs for doing their democratic duty and showing up in a town hall
if you have to get thrown
and
out of
yelling
something,
at their
you're a mob.
elected official?
If
They
you
can
get
yell
thrown
how
out,
they
How
want.
dare you
a
have
veteran.
emotions and care? How dare these voters have emotions?
I don't care if they have emotions, but no one here at this table can tell me what the voter registration breakdown in that room was. And I'm telling you, it's not representative of the district.
But it's also counterproductive.
People can show up if they want to show up.
Which is probably the reason.
Again, well, Scott, do you have any evidence that the people there weren't the congressman's constituents and didn't have valid complaints? Like, do you have any evidence that there are people who are not represented by the congressman? And here's the reality. No matter who you are in terms of your political affiliation, if you're a Democratic congressman or a Republican congressman, you will have constituents of the opposite party. Remember, Civics 101. When a person is elected to office, they may have a political agenda, but they still have an obligation to serve all of their constituents, or as many as possible, to the best of their ability, and that includes people who did not vote for them, right? For example, I live in North Carolina. We have a Democratic governor, Josh Stein. Josh Stein has an obligation to serve every North Carolinian. People who voted for him, people who didn't vote for him, people who hate his guts, people who love him, people who have no idea what's going on. Now, the way he serves them will have a political bias because he's a partisan. He's part of a party. And same thing with these Republican lawmakers. But if an angry Republican North Carolinian wants to complain about Governor Stein, he isn't obligated to listen, even if he says, hey, listen, I hear you, but I disagree with you, and I'm still going to do it this way for these reasons. That's still valid, right? And what Scott seems to suggest is unless you are a Republican voter in that constituent who agrees with everything the congressman does, so it's not simply enough to be a constituent, you have to be a Republican, and you have to be a Republican who agrees with them, your opinions apparently don't matter. Pretty weird stuff, pretty cowardly stuff. We'll continue.
It's like,
What does a fair and equal town hall look like then, where there's a fair exchange of opinions and information from elected officials to their
Actually,
constituents?
I have an answer for that. There is a better way to do this.
Not
there
telephone.
Absolutely, it's better.
Oh,
because
dude, you can
because
control a
you can
telephone. You
control-
control
Well, let me
it
finish and I'll
totally.
explain why. Because that room could hold 375 people, blue and non-mob. A teletown hall meeting, you could put thousands upon thousands of people on a telephone, more access, more questions,
Isn't that more
That is
representatives.
Isn't it
exactly
more
the
corruptible?
argument I made when I didn't want to do town halls either. I literally said, I'm
Well, I
doing
can't help if you
teletown
started
halls.
talking on the phone, Adam, as a
You
congressman.
can
but
screen the questions.
You can screen more, I think.
Can I?
So you all only want these congressmen to get yelled at by Democrats, not talk to
I
more
want
people.
them to get yelled at by their voters.
I
if
got
their
yelled at
voters
by
have
Republicans,
justified
too,
opinions.
so.
Or we could go to the corporate route where you put your question in a little computer and it appears up like a
Right,
text
and then
up on the
nobody wants
screen.
to ask anything anything spicy because it's not going to get asked and answered.
I just think there's something to people physically being
Yeah.
present, and all of these lawmakers in Washington knowing that there are faces attached to the consequences of the decisions that they're making on the.
Again, that's a great point. 100%. This idea that, what Scott wants to do is create a favorable terrain for the Republicans. If you do a telephone or telethon town hall, they will purposefully omit, or at least the likelihood that they will be able to omit questions that they find uncomfortable or difficult to answer or too critical increases dramatically. Whereas if it's an in-person town hall, it's much harder to turn a person away or to eject them when they ask a question that you find too uncomfortable or too critical of you and your party. That's why they're laughing openly at Scott, because Scott's just simply trying to create a path by which Republican lawmakers can avoid any sort of bad press or accountability for their terribly unpopular actions. It's on them. And by the way, Democrats risk the same thing. And both parties, as far as I'm concerned, deserve to take the risk. If you're a lawmaker, you should do town halls. As far as I'm concerned, it should be a constitutional requirement that if you're elected to office, you are obligated to do town halls. Kyrsten Sinema, a former Democratic senator from Arizona, turned independent, and then, of course, she left office. She didn't seek re-election. She refused to do town halls because what she did was so unpopular with her own constituents. That, as far as I'm concerned, is political malpractice. That should result, if you don't do a town hall in a certain time frame, it should immediately trigger a recall election, right? But unfortunately, that's not a check and balance, which is enshrined in the Constitution. It should be, however. That's how serious I am about it. But here's another clip.
I was planning for what if the Chinese military comes over, then what do we do? My guess is that scenario plans for how do we fight the Panamanian Defense Forces to take this. And again, it's like, here's the reason, by the way, that Donald Trump threatens our allies and not people that really deserve threats, is because he's small, he's scared, he's a coward. And you can threaten your friends because you know you're not going to start a war over it, and it makes you look really tough. If you tweet in all caps and then you threaten Panama, it makes you look like you're ready to go to war and tough. But he doesn't say much about Iran. He's pretty quiet on that. Certainly Russia. And China he's been quiet on lately.
Well,
because there's reality with that.
We weren't so quiet on Iran when we killed the head of their
he's quiet on
defense
China.
forces,
That was
but-
6 years ago. I'm talking about
he's
today.
pretty tough on Iran.
He's quiet on China because of.
I guess. Well, 6 years ago, he assassinated an Iranian general. Again, that was 6 years ago. What Kinzinger's point is not that he was. Kinzinger, by the way, celebrated Trump's assassination of Soleimani, the Iranian general in question. But that's not his point. He's not saying that Donald Trump has never been tough on Iran. He's saying that Donald Trump's current predisposition now more than ever is to attack allies and to be either appeasing towards our adversaries or to say nothing at all. And Scott simply can't refute that. Here's one last clip in which Scott gets called out by CNN host Abby Phillip because Jennings whines. Scott whines. How dare you yell at me? Why are you screaming? When the person to whom he's speaking is actually using a fairly reasonable tone of voice when you consider the panel environment and multiple people talking.
When Jeffries was saying that, he was talking about going to the streets in protest,
He said
which
fight
is
in the streets.
It's a political fight.
That's not what that's clearly not the
You
context
can
of what
defend
he
it,
said.
But if Trump uses the word fight, everyone loses
I
their
want to
minds.
remind you both
Well,
that
only when there's actual fighting that occurs, because
Right, yeah,
actually
yeah.
that's what
I want to
happened.
remind you both that it was Trump supporters who stormed the Capitol on January 6th. When January 6th happened this year, what happened? It wasn't Democrats storming the Capitol. Actually, guess what? No one stormed the Capitol this January 6th. And so it was.
You look at the video in New York City today, the people who took over Trump Tower, the people screaming at folks on
People
the
were
streets.
protesting.
Who are those
People
folks?
were protesting. They were
In
not
Trump
storming.
Tower?
They were not storming
They stormed Trump Tower?
They
Yes,
were
they
not
did.
storming.
They were inside of it.
They were not storming the. They were not
The lobby of
trying
Trump
to.
Tower is
They were not trying
gonna
to hurt a
defend that
member
mob?
of Congress.
I
There were
mean-
thousands
You're
of
not
people
defending
who
any
were
mob, you're just
prosecuted
pointing
for
out that they're
January 6th. Scott, you may
Screaming
have
at
forgotten,
people?
but you know what? You should go read your old op-ed talking about
You know
how
what?
the president caused an insurrection.
I have.
Listen, love that energy. As you know, we discussed this in multiple videos. Scott Jennings on January 6th came out with a brutal op-ed condemning January 6th and Trump, basically saying he's unhinged, he's a loser. I mean, just not saying, oh, this was bad, oh, he was irresponsible. Scott Jennings went scorched earth on Donald Trump, but that was when he stood on principle. Now he sacrificed principle for the sake of political expedience. So I love that she's bringing this up. But again, note his response to this.
That's what he did on January 6th, and that's what MAGA supporters
you could
actually
scream.
did.
You could scream at me all you want, but I have every single day
Scott.
condemned the events of January the 6th.
Scott.
Then, now, and I will continue
But
to
those
do
are
it.
the
let me
people
just
who
say-
are
let me just say one
conducting
thing.
their violence.
There was no screaming happening at this table. Okay, someone talking to you is not screaming, but I do want to play the rest of what.
So yeah, Scott had to be called. How dare you scream at me by pointing out my various hypocrisies in a reasonable tone of voice. Scott Jennings, of course, the ultimate MAGA snowflake, as they all are. I should note that they renewed his contract, and CNN did, and paid him a substantially greater sum. So Scott Jennings, again, the smuggest MAGA goon in legacy media. And I know a lot of people say, oh, CNN should fire him. Not only did they effectively rehire him, they gave him a raise. So food for thought. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.